After explaining these divisions regarding function, let us explain the way ordinary comprehension occurs in the light of this knowledge. When a man looks at an external object, for example, at a pencil, vibrations belonging to that pencil go to the optic center, by passing through certain stations, starting from the points around the optic system. And when it reflects from there to the consciousness center, the initial material comprehension occurs. This comprehension is the world comprehension completely belonging to the superficial time activity to which the brain is subject. This influence goes to the higher consciousness from the consciousness via the channel of unconscious, and there, comprehension belonging to the being occurs, which is outside of the world reality, and cannot be understood by mankind. The being knows this pencil within an encompassing comprehension. Let us repeat that the material comprehension occurring in the consciousness, and the subtle comprehension occurring in the being are not the same. The qualities of these comprehensions, depending on the matter milieux they are made of, become dense and subtle, according to the relatively dense consciousness, and comparatively very fluidic higher consciousness. Comprehension connected to consciousness manifests in a crude manner, in accordance with the material structure of the consciousness center, unlike in a compassing and complex manner as it is in the being. The above example we give about the comprehension of the pencil is a simple schematic. The way we mention may be much more complicated than this. Other related centers and stations can also be involved with this journey of influence. Likewise, some influences from the unconscious can be involved. These adopt innumerable states in accordance with innumerable necessities. Now, we will explain sleep. For comprehension to occur, the consciousness center should be free and high in frequency, up to a degree so it can invoke the impressions existing in itself. In the state of mankind we call awake, consciousness is always in connection with the higher consciousness. Similarly, it is in an open state to the centers. That is, it is in connection with centers. So, it receives the influences coming from the surroundings. In summary, in the awakened state, consciousness is in communication, on the one hand with the being, and on the other hand with its surroundings, that is, with world life. By this means, it receives influences both from above, from the superconsciousness, and from below, from the world. And by this, it prevails over the whole nervous system and through it, over the organism. That is, it governs the body in accordance with the necessities coming from the superconsciousness. We previously stated that actually the consciousness center directly governs the body. The being utilizes the body by using this center. During sleep, some centers' connections to the outer realms cease. These centers, besides the consciousness, connect to the unconscious. These centers are now related to the superconsciousness, not to the world. And we call this introversion of the centers. And such introversion of the centers, which are not sensitive to the outer realm at that time, brings about the state we call the sleep state. Therefore, these centers are passive and motionless towards the outer realm, but in contrast, very active and mobile towards the superconsciousness. At that moment, because the consciousness and related centers are free of their connection to the outer realm, in order to transfer the results of their daily acquisitions to the unconscious, they render their first accounting regarding the conscience, by the knowledge of comparison in the unconscious with ease. These results will stay there, in the unconscious. Since they are not compared yet with essence knowledge by the essence being, there are discrepancies between these and essence knowledge. Because of this, this knowledge cannot be included with the essence knowledge synthesis in the subconscious. It remains in the unconscious, at the field of the being which is near to the consciousness. Its accumulation here, as previously said, continues until the moment of death. Therefore, centers appearing immobile and passive towards the surroundings during sleep achieve important deeds within. However, their activities are not extrovert but introvert, and all of their preoccupation consists only in the procedure of passing on daily events to the unconscious. For the soundness of this procedure, they must cease their connections to the surroundings and withdraw into a rest in relation to daily life. That is, the state we call sleep must occur. Explaining the mechanism of dreams becomes easy in that state. Dreams occur in two ways, that is, by the intervention of two influence sources. One of these is the influences coming from below, from surroundings. The other is the influences coming from the superconsciousness. First of all, let us study the influences coming from the surroundings. When a sleeping person's foot is touched by a feather slightly, but not too strongly to disturb his sleep, vibrations coming out of here will not wake the center pertaining to the foot, but will disturb it. Because it is busy with its own deeds at that time, it does not want to be busy with this influence coming from surroundings. Because of this, as if shrugging off this influence coming from the foot, it conveys this to the subconscious via the channel of unconscious, which it is connected to at that time. In effect, for this center which is motionless towards surroundings to convey an influence coming from there in this way is a motion. However, it can make a small motion to do this in the face of this influence coming from outside, which is not too strong to wake it. Nevertheless, if the influence becomes a little intense, these motions increase, and the increase of motion frequencies of the center, towards the surroundings, obliges it to turn from within to outward, that is, to wake up. Now, let us continue assuming that it is not awoken. When the influence coming from the foot enters the subconscious, it grabs the suitable ones among the endless impressions existing there, and activates them. By this means, an application of imagination occurs in the subconscious automatically, without control. Reflection of every motion occurring in the brain to the consciousness center, either directly or via other channels, is a rule. However, these reflected influences are sometimes too weak to invoke impressions in the consciousness. In that case, the consciousness center does its duty without comprehending. Here, the images occurring in the subconscious reflect to the consciousness via the channel of unconscious. If these reflected impressions are strong enough to activate consciousness, frequency of the consciousness sufficiently increases to receive these images belonging to the surroundings, and comprehends the images, and wakes up at the same time. And at that moment, the dream is on. If the vibrations coming from the subconscious do not evoke enough motions in the molecules of the center constituting consciousness field, the consciousness center continues with its preoccupation, and is not busy with these images, and no dream will come. Let us say that the images reflected to the consciousness from the subconscious are comprehended by the consciousness in ways suitable to its material structure, that is, to its world reality as much as possible. Therefore, the dream is not something seen. It is a kind of imagination. Because of the occurrence of an event, that is, all exchanges between consciousness and superconsciousness, starting from the awakening in the foot happen in milliseconds, dream is momentary. Every man tickled by a feather does not necessarily have a dream. For example, the center connected to the foot is so preoccupied with its deeds that influences coming from the foot do not activate it. Similarly, vibrations coming from the subconscious may not be intense enough to activate the consciousness. Then, no dream comes. Let us come to the mechanism of dreams, whose reason is connected to the higher places, higher consciousness. When a being wants a man to have a dream for some purpose, it sends vibrations pertaining to the dream, which it will show him to the higher consciousness field of the being, which that man is subject to. These influences sent to the higher consciousness pass to the consciousness via the channel of the unconscious, and increase the frequencies of the molecules of the center expressing consciousness. This state brings about the comprehensions of the impressions, pertaining to the incoming vibrations in the consciousness. And this happens as follows. At that time, consciousness is actually turned towards the unconscious. Because the influences coming from above are purposeful, each of these comes down as adjusted, in order to evoke a required impression which exists in the unconscious. And these adjusted influences descending to the consciousness, which is actually in connection with the unconscious, results in consciousnesses receiving the required impressions from the unconscious. And comprehension of images coming from the unconscious occurs in the consciousness. So, the being that wants to show the dream, by sending adjusted influences, according to qualities of innumerable materials in the unconscious, ensures the taking out of materials it wants from among these, towards the consciousness field. Thus, this kind of dreams occurs as well through imagination. Dreams coming from above or below can easily be discerned by more or less experienced mankind. The ones coming from below are rather disarrayed, vague and dim. The ones coming from the higher consciousness are ordered, vivid and deeply impressive.